Hey everybody, this video is going to give you an overview into the MCAT exam. MCAT is the medical college admissions test. It's the test that you have to take when you want to apply to medical school to become a doctor. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the sections of the MCAT. I'm going to give you an overview of the sections. So the first section we have is the Chemphis section, and that is going to be a 95-minute section, 95 minutes. And then we have a 10-minute break, and then we have cars, which is a 90-minute section. And then we have a 30-minute break. That's the quote-unquote lunch break. That's if you're able to eat lunch. Most people, I find that the best thing to do there is to eat a snack. And I'll do a future video about, about what your test taking strategy should be, what you should do during these breaks. 95 minutes for Biochem. 10-minute break, and then lastly, Psych, 95 minutes. Right. And so what this totals out to be is a little bit over 7 hours. That's a long time. I mean, this is a long exam. 7 hours and 20 minutes exam. That's not including the stuff you do beforehand, the stuff you do after. This exam takes the whole day. And again, I'll talk in the future about how to maintain your stamina, how to maintain your strength for this exam. In this video, I'm just going to go through the sections. The first section is the Chemphis section. Technically, it's called Chemical and Physical Foundations of Biological Systems, but I call it Chemphis. We often abbreviate it CP. In this section, I like to joke, I've joked in the previous video, that this section is the main reason why you took all those pre-med classes, the chem, the physics, the organic, the gen chem. This section tests your content with the greatest amount of breadth. That is, it is the widest section as far as content goes. And what that means is that for this section in particular, we learn how to study, we learn how to figure out what exactly the test wants us to know. So for example, I've already done a playlist on physics here. What to study for physics, how to understand physics. You should check it out on my channel. And I'm planning to do playlists in the future on organic and gen chem because to me, that content is the hardest to figure out what you should study versus what you should leave alone. The timing on this section, 95 minutes, 59 questions. And we're going to see that timing is the same for 2 other sections. So moving on, the second section of the MCAT is called CARS. That's Critical Analysis and Reading Skills. This section is the only section of the exam that does not test any prior knowledge. What that means is that everything that you need to know is located within the passage. So this is the section that tests you really on how good you are at reading, figuring out what passages are saying, understanding the author's opinion on it. But just because there's no prior knowledge tested doesn't mean that there's no way to study for this section. In fact, there's a lot of different ways to study for this section. How to read a passage, how to understand the main idea of a passage, how to analyze what the author is saying. The passages are broken down into 2 different types of content. I wouldn't pay too much attention to this. It's, the MCAT says it's half social sciences, half humanities. And what that means is that basically the content is about things like sociology, philosophy, history. Oftentimes you get things about like art or music, some type of musician, things like that. You've probably seen a similar section if you took the SAT or the ACT back in high school. This exam is a lot like that. This section is a lot like that, although the passages are longer, the passages are harder, and the questions are harder. But it's the same general style. Now, the third section of the MCAT is Biochem, Biological and Biochemical Foundations of Living Systems. And what that means is that this section is really the easiest section for somebody who is a bio major. And this section is where you really see the benefit of taking more upper-level bio classes because the passages often are asking about higher level biology concepts. This section is definitely the deepest as far as content. And so, for example, it's going to ask you, much deeper questions about bio, much deeper questions about biochemistry. Again, the timing is the same. One thing I will say as far as the biochem and biology division here it says that there's 65% biology. I found that that's not entirely the case. I found that some of this biology, can actually be classified as biochemistry. And the reason I say that is, for example, in biology, they include things like DNA replication, transcription, translation, things like that. And those are things that, for me, I consider to be biochemistry because I learned those more in my biochem classes. And the last thing I will say as far as this section goes is that I think biochem is the single most important section of the single most important subject, of the whole exam. And the reason I say that is that it's a decent chunk of this section, and there's also a lot of biochemistry on this section of the exam. And so I think that biochem is the single most important semester. Typically, people take 1 semester of it. It's the single most important semester in your pre-med career. So pay attention in your biochem classes, folks. Okay, and then the last section is the psychology and sociology. And there's a little bit of bio on this section as well. This section was added back in 2015, so it's a new section of the exam. So before that, the exam had 3 sections. You may have heard, if you know people who've taken the test, you may know them. You may know that it was out of 45. Each section was scored out of 15. So it was 15, 15, 15, 45. And there was basically an analog of each of the sections of those 3 sections. So the first one, I believe, was was basically the physical sciences section. The second one was the reading, and then the third one was some type of bio. 15, 15, 15. And of course, they added a section, and they changed the scoring. And they changed the exam as a whole a little bit. But for the most part, those are the big changes that they made. And this section is the new one. So what does it test? It tests psychology and sociology. Essentially, the makers of the exam realized that physicians have to be aware of the world around them. They have to be aware of the more sociological and psychological questions relating to the practice of medicine. So they wanted their physicians to kind of have a more holistic perspective. And the timing is the same as far as this section goes. I will say that I think this section is the most terminology heavy, meaning that there's a lot of memorizing of terms on this section. Each person, whatever your strengths are, there's a section for you. So the first section is a section for chemistry majors or engineering majors or people who generally like math or like physical sciences. So the science majors in particular, especially the non-bioscience majors. That third section, on the other hand, is the section for bio majors. This is the section that if you're a bio major, you're going to have very little trouble on. This section was my favorite section because I was a political science major and I was used to doing a lot of reading. I found this section to be by far the easiest for me. And I would imagine that if you were a psychology major or a sociology major, or if you were generally interested in the social sciences, then you would find this section also to be easiest. And I didn't have much trouble with this section. For me, the hardest one was this one. So this is the section that a non-science major might find have a lot of trouble with. And this is the section that if you haven't taken a lot of bio classes, you might find a lot of trouble. So what's the point that I'm making here? The point is that whatever your strengths are and whatever the thing that your strength as far as your pre-med career was, you'll probably find that one section, it'll benefit you a lot on one of the sections of the MCAT. And there are other sections that you're going to have to really work on and to compensate for some of your weaknesses. So, the MCAT that's what the MCAT is. It wants to make sure you're a holistic person. You're a person who's good at a lot of different things. And that gives you an advantage when you're good at, some things that you're good at, it gives you an advantage, and other things you're going to be at a disadvantage for. And that's normal. Everybody has that. Everybody has sections they like and sections they don't like. Overall question breakdown. So this is not really anything special. Let's break down that science, the half that's science. So we have biology, biochemistry. So we see that biology is the most important, then followed by biochemistry. As I said before, I do think that biochem does take a little bit of a slice of biology depending on what you classify as what. Then we have gen chem, then we have physics, and finally we have organic. So I've already done a playlist about physics. So in the future, I'm going to do a breakdown of each of these sections. As I said, I'm going to do a breakdown of the organic on the exam and the gen chem on the exam. But beyond that, I also want to talk about each of the 4 sections of the MCAT in the future, about what, how to study for each of these sections, some of the strategies that you can use. I already made a video about the strategies you can use for cars. I'm going to do more of that. I'm going to talk a lot about biochem, the biology, how to understand the different concepts. I'm going to talk a little bit about this in the future. So if you're interested in all this content, make sure to subscribe. And check out some of the other content on the channel. If you have any questions about the exam, please let me know in the comments below. I'm planning to do, again, a future video about how to take the exam itself. What are some overall strategies that you can do? What should you eat for lunch? What should you, should you drink coffee? What should you do? The MCAT is a hard exam. It's definitely not an easy exam. But if you study hard and you do a lot of practice, then you'll go into it confident and you'll go into it knowing what to expect. And so, again, if you're interested, make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching.